You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and SoundCloud. I kind of feel like the Ohio State Northwestern game is almost an afterthought after what happened yesterday. Like, I almost kind of feel tempted to start with, Michigan and Penn State and then Wisconsin, Illinois, and work our way back to Ohio State. I don't know. What do you guys think?
We can do it either which way. I mean, we can, that's fine.
Okay. Well, Matt, you and I started talking about it before we started recording. We were talking about Michigan, Penn State. And why don't you tell me a little bit about what you saw in that game?
Well, I mean, I think that was a weird day in terms of Whiskey losing in such a dramatic fashion. I mean, there were brilliant people all over the world who thought they would go past 10-point spread on beating Illinois.
But there were more brilliant people out there.
Yes, they do consider themselves brilliant. So anyhow, that you were shaking your head at the whole thing because it's optics of, as an Ohio State fan, you want Whiskey to come in looking as strong and virile as possible in terms of national perception.
Right.
So I was taken aback by that. But the Penn State Michigan game, while Michigan, both teams are just, the Swiss cheese teams. You just got holes aplenty through them. But I think perception-wise and given how the game played out, having Michigan getting close enough really made that make them earn their rank to where the perception of them nationally was like, wow, they're not that bad. They almost beat Penn State on an away game. They've won their last so games, and if they finish out winning their games before they play us, it could cover the amount of weight that we lost with Whiskey losing to an unranked team. So it's, I just, the comfort of all this, if I could wrap it around Ohio State, is like Ohio State, I just think is just going to roll through anything that lives under the Big Ten. I think they're just going to roll over them. So it really doesn't, to me, that as a Buckeye fan, if they keep beating them that way, it really doesn't matter where people are ranked because they're doing what everyone perceives them to be a great team should do. They're just kicking ass and taking names. And if that continues, then, we write our ticket to the playoffs.
Yeah. Chad, what did you see in that Penn State-Michigan game that stood out to you?
It's just it's crazy, man. I feel like you saw the first quarter like he was still playing, running that archaic offense, and then all of a sudden, they get down 21-0, and they start passing to the receivers, which was opening up their running game, and I just don't understand, why you bring that guy over from Alabama and you're still running that bullshit, and then you get down 21-0. Sorry about that. Johnny Cash is freaking out, boys.
Yeah, beat it, Johnny.
Yeah, I just don't understand the whole deal with it, but whatever. I mean, Penn State, Franklin, they were one thing I will say about that game though, and I think you mentioned it in the thread last night. Is they were celebrating it like it was like the Big Ten championship, like they were going to the college football playoff. I mean, Jesus. They beat up on a weak ass Michigan team, and the people were running to the field. Franklin saying, "Oh, we've been playing championship football all year." Like, what the fuck, dude, are you talking about, man?
Yeah. I mean, you beat a team you were favored to beat by what? 10 points. You were a 10-point favorite going in the
10
game,
points.
And you're celebrating like you just won. Like you just won the Super Bowl. That stood out to me.
Exactly. Crazy.
Anything else stand out to you about the game that you wanted to mention?
Not really, man. I mean, Penn State. I'm not quite sure what his name is, number 11, but he was in on it. Seemed like every tackle.
Micah Parsons. Yeah, Parsons.
Oh boy, a Buckeye recruit.
Yeah.
He's a beast. But I'm not really worried about either one of those teams, like Sloaner said, to allude to that. But, I think Wisconsin next weekend's going to come in with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder, but we'd say that for later down the road. But,
Yeah, you could be right about that. Tim, what did you see last night in that Penn State-Michigan game that kind of stood out to you?
Well, I mean, I think for me, I feel like Penn State is a high-quality, very good Big Ten team. Mm-hmm. Michigan has obviously lots of problems, and maybe they're getting a little bit better, but they're not even one of the best Big Ten teams. And that's kind of what I feel like I saw. I mean, I think Penn State got out to that early lead, and Michigan just seemed lost in the whole first half. Mm-hmm. And, at this point in the season, to be that lost, and Patterson didn't look good, and give credit to Penn State's defense. I thought they played really pretty well in the first quarter. And, Parsons was all over the field. But I just, looking at the box scores and looking at the stats, like, Sean Clifford, 14 of 25, 182 yards. Like, it wasn't anything great. Shea Patterson, 24 for 41, 276 and a pick. He didn't look good till the second half. Like, mm-hmm. I think that they're both decent teams. I think Penn State's better than Michigan. I think they've got better coaching. That's part of the reason they're better than Michigan. But I think Penn State's a very good Big Ten team. I think Ohio State is another level from either of these teams, and I think they're going to demonstrate that when they play both of them. And Ohio State is a national contender, whereas like these two, along with Wisconsin, are like vying for like winning the Big Ten, and that's it. And I think that's the difference, and I think we'll see it when we play both of these teams. I just was unimpressed with both teams, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think either team put together a four-quarter performance. And clearly Michigan seemed overwhelmed and unprepared by the environment. I mean, as you could see, Michigan comes out for their first possession, the first play from scrimmage, and Harbaugh has to call a goddamn timeout to avoid getting a delay of game penalty. And there were other moments in that game where they just there were other moments in that game where Michigan just looked unprepared for the moment, whether it be penalties, whether it be mental mistakes, just lack of execution. There does seem to be a trend here with this team. Dreadfully slow starts, untimely mistakes, where it be turnovers, penalties, and a lack of execution in big moments. I mean, as evidenced by, Ronnie Bell dropping a ball that hit him right in the belly on fourth down in the end zone that effectively ended the game. And, I feel bad for that kid. He actually played very well. But it didn't surprise me that that's how Michigan went down in this game. Just a mental mistake, a lack of execution. It's weird. You look at the box score, Tim, kind of going back to your comments about it. Michigan outgained Penn State 417 to 283. They dominated time of possession, 37-45 to 22-15. They had a 26-14 edge in first downs. I mean, after that first quarter or so, they really dominated the game. But they just had a series of untimely breakdowns, whether it be, they let that tailback from Penn State, his name's, I'm blanking on his name, but he ripped off a 44-yard run. I think that's to set up their second touchdown of the game. And I remember Fowler distinctly saying that running back had come into the game averaging 2.1 yards per carry. And he rips off a 44-yarder right up the gut. And then you had later in the second half, it was really Penn State's only points in the second half was the blown coverage on Hamler for the 53-yard touchdown. And Michigan, to me, that's kind of how they've played all season long. They have a series of breakdowns, and then they play well, but the breakdowns are so damaging that they can't recover from them. And I think that's kind of how this game played out. And I am with you. These two teams look like they're several echelons below Ohio State.
Yeah, they're December football teams, meaning they're looking for the Blue Bonnet Bowl or the Sun Sweet Bowl, and things that happen before January or before January 2nd. You just can see, but to Tim's point, man, it's like you can't build a strong house off a weak foundation, and I think that you see a team that the play, like there was a spat there was a penalty like every third or fourth play.
Yeah.
And that's always, to me, like a sign that you're not getting strong coaching and discipline, because, penalties are the things that tear teams down, and great coaches get their team to focus on the small things, because you get the small things right, you can have big things happen on the other end. So
totally.
It's annoying.
I totally agree with you on that point, actually, Matt. And it brings me to a sequence in the game that I remembered, and then I went back and watched it this morning on the replay with respect to penalties and Michigan just lack of discipline. So on Penn State's second touchdown drive of the game, they were in the red zone. Michigan committed back-to-back offside penalties that moved Penn State closer to obviously closer to the goal line. Penn State eventually punches it in. Then on the ensuing Michigan possession, a 45-yard completion to Nico Collins is wiped off the board by an ineligible man downfield penalty. And then 2 plays later, Patterson throws a terrible interception on a botched screen play. And it's the sequences like that we've seen all season long, whether it was just a series of mental mistakes. And there was also an ineligible man downfield on Michigan's first touch. So they ended up scoring. But it was that play where the ball got popped up in the air, Peoples-Jones got hit, and then I think that kid, Ronnie Bell, grabbed it out of the air, ran in for a touchdown, but it got called back because it was another ineligible man downfield penalty. That, to me, speaks to an offensive line that isn't yet used to blocking in the RPO system. Because I think on both of those plays, they might have been RPOs, and you had a guy blocking downfield thinking that Shea Patterson was keeping the ball or that he handed it off to a running back. And instead, he threw a pass, but the offensive lineman was so far downfield, he gets flagged. In any case, it's a tragic comedy of mental mistakes. Chad, you were going to make a point? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, that was just, one of the typical plays. It takes the crowd out of it for 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's a flag, and then they get the ball taken back, and then it creates that. I don't even think they scored a touchdown on that drive, did they?
I think they ultimately did on the one on the carom that was called before a touchdown. I think that was Michigan's first touchdown drive. They ended up punching it in, but it was just you're on the road.
They're not a very disciplined team, if you will.
No. This team reminds me of some of the Cooper teams. I remember the 2000 Ohio State team that finished, it was Cooper's last year. They finished 8-4 that year. And, they had plenty of talent, but they were just undisciplined. They had these mental breakdowns at the worst times and, just shot themselves in the foot. He had a couple other teams like that where the talent was clearly there. He didn't have the quarterback play, and the team was just undisciplined, and it drives me nuts. Anyway, that's Michigan. So
I think the other thing about Michigan, Zach, is that do they really have the talent? Because they have not been. They've been recruiting some good spots like wide receiver, but they have not had top 2, top 3 recruiting classes. Every once in a while, they'll have a top 5. So you kind of have okay talent with not good coaching. And then I think it was Urban Meyer that made this point last week, and I think I might have mentioned it on the pod, that, hey, look, you can transform your offense to be a spread offense with RPO and all these different options, but if you don't have the personnel, meaning the offensive line and the skill players who know what they're supposed to do and a quarterback who's used to running that, it's going to take you, several recruiting cycles to get the team that you need in order to effectively run that offense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're seeing out of Michigan is just, Gaddis is there, and it's unclear whether or not he's truly being given free rein to call the plays because the play calling in the first half was abominable. And, are they really making progress towards that goal, or is the whole thing just muddled because Harbaugh can't let it go and they don't have the players and, this is going to be a lost season of them trying to transition to something different. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they've got Notre Dame at home, then they've got Michigan State, which will always be tough, and they've got Ohio State. That's probably 3 more losses, so they could be 7-5.
Yeah. I think they have a trip to Indiana somewhere in there too, and Indiana's been kind of a thorn in their side. They
do. Funny thing is, to your point, Tim, is that maybe they're just not good at talent evaluation. I mean, you see the Gaddis interview; he just got him on the phone for 5 minutes. let's hire this guy. Are they doing the due diligence on all the players that they're recruiting? Because I don't think they've been bad in terms of, 5 stars, 4 stars in terms of where they ranked in the thing, but they just may not getting the players that are going to make a difference what system they're running or whatever they're doing. And maybe they're evaluating people who just aren't. Maybe they're overrated. I don't know. I just think that I put a lot of suspect in anything that Harbaugh does, because it doesn't seem like he does the due diligence. It's all from the gut, and that's good to a certain point. But you need to have something a little deeper than that to compete on the elite level, at least.
I think that's totally on the table, actually. I think the idea that they're not evaluating talent properly, they're not developing talent properly, I think that's totally on the table. And then, then you have the game day situational stuff that has been highly questionable. But what's interesting is Michigan then went on, as we're breaking down the myriad of issues that Michigan has, but then they went on to dominate the second half of that game. And which makes me question, okay, then what is Penn State? Now, Penn State hung on and won that game, but the fact that Michigan was able to get the running game going, they were able to start hitting plays downfield, their defense completely stymied Penn State's offense, save for one play, and that was the deep ball to Hamler. That was a big one, though. That was a big breakdown, granted. I mean, that was the difference in the game. But so, yeah, I go back to... Well, I think we've already made the point. The point is that these are two teams that are several notches below Ohio State, and I don't think Penn State. I'm far less concerned now, I guess, about that game in Columbus than I was going into last night. What did you?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. What did you see out of Penn State, Tim? You were going to make some. Were you going to make another point about Penn State?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think Penn State's a good team. I think they're probably the second best team in the Big Ten, but I think there's a big delta between Ohio State and Penn State still.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would agree with that.
I think that the coaching staff we have now, which I think I've said a few times, I mean, even if they did plug up the holes with J.K. and Teague or whomever, I mean, I think we've got the talent to make the adjustments accordingly for the receivers. I mean, I just don't see that anybody containing this offense that I've seen play thus far.
Yeah. Well, so there was another result, actually a much bigger, impactful result, I think, at this stage, which was the Wisconsin-Illinois game. And I think we all saw bits and pieces of that. But Wisconsin went into that game, into Champaign yesterday, a 30.5-point favorite, if I'm not mistaken. Chad, do I have that right? Was it 30.5 the line? I think that was right.
It actually, some of them had it at 31.
31.
So, yeah.
My God. And,
right, ridiculous.
Illinois they had shown signs of life earlier this year. They gave Nebraska a pretty good game earlier in the year. They had the big comeback against Michigan, down 28, scoring 25 unanswered. So I don't think they're not the same completely punchless team that we've seen for the last 5 or 6 years, but still, you're Wisconsin. You're a 31-point favorite. You're the number one statistically, and I'm going to say this in air quotes, the number one defense in the country. And you outgain Illinois 420 to 315. Time of possession dominated it 40-49 to 19-11 in time of possession. But yeah, Illinois kept it close, and I think it was a 13-7 game at the half. And then they capitalized on 2 fourth-quarter turnovers, big turnovers late in that game. One of them by Jonathan Taylor in the red zone. I think he fumbled at like the Illinois 18-yard line with about 7 minutes to play. And then Jack Cohn threw the pick with about 2.5 to go. And both of those led to Illinois scores, and that was the difference in the game. The last one was the game-winning field goal. Chad, I want to kick it to you. What did you see from the Wisconsin-Illinois game that stood out to you?
Well, we got to give Timmy props, Big Sloaner, I guess, since he did make that call. I think it's like he said it was early second quarter, but regardless, that was a good call. But I will say what, man, those Illinois, that quarterback and the receivers in that second half when they were mounting that comeback made some spectacular catches.
Yeah, they did.
I started watching it probably, right at the second half, and that quarterback made real nice throws.
Yeah,
and those receivers, I mean, it was great. But, Wisconsin, I mean, honestly, I don't, it kind of took my opinion of them a little bit down a couple notches watching it yesterday. But, I still feel that, Buckeye fans and people should not read it into it too much because I believe they're going to come in here with a different attitude and different mindset. And, they're going to get over that pretty quick. I think they'll get them over those pretty quick. So,
yeah.
But Illinois looks like they should have won a couple more games. I mean, after the way they were playing second half. But
yeah. So Illinois quarterback, Brandon Peters, he's a Michigan transfer, right? He was at Michigan a couple years ago, and I actually like what I saw out of him when he was at Michigan. And I agree with you, Tim. I thought he was good. He had a couple of zone reads where he kept the ball for big gains. And then that touchdown to close the gap to, 23-21, was a dart over the middle on a slant. I think that was 30 yards out. That was a big-time throw. Yeah. Tim, what did you see out of that game?
Peters is a real quarterback. I mean, Michigan. He should be starting for Michigan. I think he's every bit as good as Shea Patterson.
I agree.
And I think it's one of Harbaugh's failings is letting him go because he'd been in the system a couple years. And so for me, I think you hit the nail on the head, Zach. Like, Illinois gave Nebraska a really good game. They had a chance against Michigan. And after the first quarter, when Wisconsin didn't come out and literally punched them in the face, I just said, Illinois at home. This is going to be a 4-quarter game. It's going to be close. I didn't really think they would win, but I thought that, it would be 23-20 or, I thought it would be within 10 points for sure. And so, they're playing tough. Lovie Smith, I think, is a good coach, ex-Bears coach, so I kind of got a little bit of love for Lovie.
Love for Lovie.
and I love the beard Lovie's got going, man.
Yeah, he looks like Black Santa. He's got the recruiting going. He's gotten a few big recruits in the last couple of years to go there, and obviously getting the transfer out of Peters. They're coming out of the basement. Illinois is probably not going to win the West anytime soon, but I think they're going to be they're going to be like an Indiana type that's good and has good players and is well coached and is tough and gives people problems. And as it goes for Wisconsin, we've been saying it all year. They haven't really played anybody. They played their best game against Michigan, and even there, they let Michigan kind of come back a little bit. The quarterback, even though he put up some decent stats, is pedestrian. You shut down Taylor. They just don't have a lot of other weapons. I think Wisconsin is what Wisconsin always is, which is a good team for the West. And when they come play the big boys in the East, for the most part, they're going to get smacked.
Yeah. That was my basic read on it. Matt, what did you see? Did you watch some of that game yesterday?
No, I had to save my game chips for later in the day, and I wasn't going to be wasting it on that game, which I maybe should have, given that it turned into a close game. But what I took away from it is simply this: is that there's two things. One, whiskey's gonna, nothing to humble you than to be shown where you have weak points, and especially in such a humiliating loss. Mm-hmm. So they won't be coming into Columbus with their chest out as much. They're going to be coming back because they want to prove that they're a top team. And that's a great fire, because they can say, well, we're number 6. We can beat these teams, rather than we have something to prove, which is a little bit more dangerous because they have their back against the wall. Mm-hmm. That being said, what has been proven against Wisconsin is that they're awesome at home and not so awesome on the road. And unfortunately, this game they're going to be on the road. So I think it's going to be pretty ugly, because they are one-dimensional, and you have to have both a high level of elite talent, as well as schemes and plays and options that are just going to keep the other team on their heels. And Wisconsin is certainly not that team. So I still think it's going to be a pretty big blowout, but it was very instructive to see how flawed they were. I was kind of surprised that they were that flawed.
Yeah. I to your point about instructive, I made a couple observations about the game, and then that I thought that could carry over into the Ohio State game. The first was that I was surprised that Illinois was able to run the football with as much success as they did, especially in the second half. They started to gain some confidence, and then they really got into a flow offensively late in that game, and they were running the ball really well. Their running back, Reggie Corbin, he looks like a J.K. Dobbins clone. And in fact, I looked them both up both their numbers up on ESPN.com and their profiles. Corbin is listed at 5'10", 220. Dobbins is listed at 5'10", 217. They both wear the number 2. And I was watching Corbin run all over Wisconsin in the second half of that game, and I said to myself, God, he looks like J.K. Dobbins. You could put him in an Ohio State uniform, with the number 2, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So that, to me, stood out because they're going to see a much better player in Dobbins, who has, the exact same profile as Corbin, and he'll be running behind a much better offensive line. So that doesn't bode well for Wisconsin. The other thing that stood out to me is that they only had 9 completions in the game, Illinois did, but they averaged almost 20 yards a completion against Wisconsin. So they were completing balls down the field against that Wisconsin defense. They had a 48-yarder, a 29-yarder, a 19-yarder, 18, 15, 14. Everyone who caught a pass had at least one reception of 15 yards or more. So that, to me, spoke a little bit to maybe some holes in that Wisconsin defense, and when you have the personnel and the scheme to really exploit them. So I'd like to say I'm looking forward to seeing how all that carries over into the Ohio State game. The other thing I noticed was, Jonathan Taylor, 132 yards, but on 28 carries. He's your typical volume Wisconsin back, right? I mean, at first glance, the total yardage output looks impressive until you look at the volume of carries that he's getting and also the lack of explosive runs. His longest run from scrimmage was only 22 yards yesterday. And last week against Sparty, it was only 13. I think they played Toledo or somebody the week before that, and he had like a 48-yarder, but that doesn't really count. The week before against Northwestern, his longest run from scrimmage was only 15 yards. So against quality defenses, he doesn't have a lot of explosion. He's not a home run hitting back, and I think it's going to be a long day for him next week. I do. I think he's going to struggle.
Gee, can I interject here real quick because I got to roll out?
Yeah, please do, Matt.
I just want to say a couple things about the Buckeyes because I know you guys are going to visit the game from Friday night. But
sure, Chad. Go ahead.
I mean, it's so exciting to watch this team. But one of the biggest things that stuck out to me was like the third play that Fields turned in. The third down that he turned into. That was just amazing play.
Yeah, I think it was like a 3rd and 15, right?
It was a 3rd and 15.
Yeah.
Just like those feet of his, man, it was amazing.
Awesome.
Threw some great passes. I'll let you guys discuss that. But one of the beautiful things I saw about it, defense was great. But, when I think you're seeing this team being just a solid unit like we really haven't seen in a while. That entire team was out there when Hope made that field goal, man, right before half.
Yeah, that was great.
I mean, Chase Young was it was just so awesome to see that. But yeah, it was, and I'm telling you, that's going to play big for us down the road because we need to see what kind of leg he's got because, we get in, not looking ahead, but we get into the college football play, that type of thing. Teams, you're going to need a leg like that, I think. So that was nice to see that. But you guys bring it home, rest away. It was good to be on with you guys. Go Bucks.
All right, Chad.
I'll talk to you on Wednesday or Thursday.
All right, we'll check in with you later this week, man. Thanks for making the time tonight.
All right, see you later, Joe.
All right,
bye, guys.
All right, so that's a good segue then. So finally, let's why don't we get back to Friday night? Ohio State Northwestern. The Buckeyes handled their business 52-3, and actually, looking back at the predictions, Matt, you had Ohio State 59-3 in your prediction. Tim, you had it 49-7 Bucks. I think you guys came in the closest out of everybody. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, it does. And Tim, you had Penn State winning 34-17. We did not see Josh Gaddis torpedo Harbaugh in the postgame. You were wrong about that, unfortunately. But and Matt, you had the Nittany Lions final score right, 28. You had them winning 28-17. So both of you guys were pretty spot on some of this action this week. Matt, why don't I kick it to you, man? What did you see on Friday night out of the Buckeyes?
Well, the Buckeyes. What I like about this team is that I'm not getting nervous when they come out slow in the first quarter. because I know there's a storm of brewing coming in the second quarter. And before it even started, they even put a stat on there that the Bucks had scored more in the second quarter than Northwestern had scored in all the games combined. So all their quarters. So I was like, yeah, 6 games. I was like, what? There's a couple things that really hit home for me. Was one, their third down, complete, like executing on third down, and most importantly, like how Fields does that, and he's the one that creates the plays. Where you see his true gift to this team is on third down, because he can scramble, he can run, and he's got a cannon for an arm. The thing that I really liked the most was the precision of before the end of halftime, how they used their timeouts and how they used their play calling and how they didn't overreach, and they got those 3 points on the board. I think it's something, given how Chad was talking about everyone's reaction, I think it was because they probably practiced that drill to death, and to get it down to where there's 4 seconds left and to score 50, and having a kicker who could do that, which Plummer's right, that having someone who can do that is a gift unto itself that will serve us so great in the future. That was the biggest thing for me. I mean, I like that sense of precision and play calling and discipline on all players to get it to a place where they thought that they could score, and they didn't rush themselves. They didn't throw long balls. Fields threw the ball out when he seemed like he was getting near sacked. So it showed all the discipline that we really wanted to see from these guys in one series and scoring on a field goal. And, field goal is like a hand job sometimes. You're like, okay, I'll take it. But like the way that series was put together was just pure beauty.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the kicking game. I think it's worth mentioning that in addition to Hobbiel's 55-yarder there at the end of the half, you got to give credit to Drew Chrisman on the possession before, pinning Northwestern at the half-yard line.
That's right.
That's what really created that opportunity to kick the field goal at the end of the half. And you mentioned, well, I don't know if you mentioned this. Maybe I was thinking this while you were talking, but Ohio State's second to last possession of the second quarter, they had the ball kind of deep in their own end. And rather than forcing, I think they had a 3rd and long, and rather than forcing it, they handed off, got a modest run, and kicked the ball away, thinking, okay, we've got an opportunity to pin Northwestern deep, which is exactly what they did, get the ball back and with an opportunity to score. And then you saw just stellar special teams play, starting with, with Chrisman's punt, pinning him at the half-yard line, and then Hobbiel with the 55-yarder. That was... You're talking about precision. I mean, it doesn't get more precise than that when you can be that precise in the kicking game, What other observations did you have about initial observations you had, Matt?
Chase Young, the depth of this team also, I think, came through again. It's like you're seeing people out there. I think one time, I forget what player that you said, is like, you were like, why is so-and-so out there?
Yeah.
And why is so-and-so out there? And I liked also that we talked about toughness. NPF was kind of shaky there at offensive line the first 2 or 3 series, and Munford was hurt and came in just to kind of steady things, and that gave NPF some time to kind of catch his breath. And he came in there from there on out, played a great game. But also other players came in and handled their business really, really well, both on the offensive and defensive. And Master Teague, I mean, he damn near got 100 yards too. And that 70-yard run, I didn't know he had wheels like that. But, man, it's just like you keep getting surprised by people that you're seeing on the team who are underclassmen, who don't have a lot of experience, and just the level of talent and how much they can immediately contribute. And it's, if I was any other team in the Big Ten, I would just be frightened, because it's not like you're saying, well, they got, this is an antiquated example. Yeah, they got Earl Campbell, and he's hard to tackle. It's like they have so many different players that can hurt you and hurt you bad, that it makes them a hard team to prepare for.
Yeah, it was another family reunion game yesterday, Matt, as you like to call them. Yeah, Tim, what did you see on Friday night that really stood out to you?
Well, I mean, all the things Matt said, I agree with all that with respect to the game. But what I feel like when I watch a game like against Northwestern and it ends up 52-3 is particularly if you look back over the last 2 or 3 years for Ohio State, like how many games did they have against like a Northwestern or some team that they should crush, but that they ended up beating, but not beating the way that they should.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where that sort of came from, especially with the intensity of Urban Meyer as a coach, but it just happened. And so I've been very happy this year to see Ohio State doing what Ohio State should do against teams like Northwestern. Northwestern's not a bad team, but Ohio State should beat them 52-3.
Yeah.
That's how much better they are than them. And so, the focus and the toughness as we've talked about, and just the, as Matt said too, the depth of this team, all to me points towards, Ohio State being able to get through the Big Ten schedule and get themselves into the playoff. You need depth, you need intensity, you need that toughness, and I don't know why the team didn't have it for the last few years, but in spite of the fact that, this game was over, and really in the first quarter, Ohio State kept the intensity and won the way that they should have won. Guys didn't mail it in.
Yeah.
So that's one big concept that I have really liked, and it's continued with Northwestern. The other one, and this is a bit of a broken record, but Justin Fields is quickly becoming one of the best players Ohio State has had in the last 2 decades.
I agree with that.
If he continues on this trajectory, particularly at the position of quarterback, where we haven't seen anybody like this really probably since like Troy Smith, and even Troy Smith, I think Justin Fields is probably gonna be better than Troy Smith ultimately was. I just think he's the difference. I think Ohio State's a great team, but again, if you look back over the last handful of years, Haskins was amazing thrower but couldn't run, and that had its issues with the offense in terms of it being a little bit one-dimensional. Barrett, we've talked about, Terrell Pryor, Braxton Miller, like you just keep going. And we haven't had quarterbacks that have been able to do all the things that Justin Fields is doing. And I don't know, Zach, I know you saw it because you get them, but Doug Marie sent out that text about running into Justin Fields' father.
Yeah, I saw that.
And his father having kind of like a Cheshire Cat grin, basically saying, "Hey, you didn't think my kid was ready, but I knew he was." And Justin Fields was ready for this year when he came here. It's probably why he came here. And he's proving it. He's ready. He's ready for the big stage. The guy's ready to take this team to the playoffs. And, short of him getting injured, I think that's where it's headed. And I think he's the difference. I think if you put an average quarterback or even a decent quarterback with this team, I think that there'd be more trouble than we've seen so far.
Yeah. I mean, if it were Tate Martell, if he were the quarterback.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And you get that sense of confidence. Like, I don't think I've had that sense of confidence in a quarterback. I mean, since what? Belisari? Just kidding. No, I mean, but like even Troy Smith, I was, there was something that he was very great about him. But I mean, like there was, this guy just inspires like so much confidence. Like, I don't worry about he's not impulsive. He doesn't make rash decisions, and he doesn't use he doesn't seem like he leans on one trait as a crutch. Like he uses his whole toolbox. And I think Tim's 100% right. He could go down as like the best quarterback. Yeah, I mean, if you compare him to Schlichter, who would you probably say he's on top of Ohio State?
He played 4 years too, right? Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have to be talking about those two together with Troy Smith and seeing which one and so that. But this kid is just doing all the right things, and every game he's just getting a little bit better.
Yeah, he's completing 71% of his passes. He's got 22 touchdown passes, only 1 interception. I guess if you want to nitpick, sometimes he hangs onto the ball a little too long. But you know what? And Tim, Doug Marie has said this a couple of times. He likes playmaking Justin Fields. He likes the Justin Fields who takes a couple risks and hangs onto the ball and a little bit longer to try and make a play downfield. I think you live with the sacks because what you get is a guy who, for the most part, is going to find his way out of pressure, find his way out of sticky situations more often than not, and he's going to make a play for you down the field. Chad made reference to it before he had to go. It was a 3rd and 15 against Northwestern, and they had the play diagnosed perfectly. They had a good coverage. They got pressure on him. They flushed him out of the pocket. Even one of their defensive linemen had a shot at Fields, and Fields shook him off, and he finds KJ Hill for 20 yards downfield. I mean, that's just demoralizing. It's demoralizing if you're a defense, and that's something that you cannot prepare for if you're a defensive coordinator. That's something, there's no way you can simulate that in practice. There's no way you can prepare for that. And there's only a handful of programs that have a quarterback like that, and not coincidentally, they're among the 5 or 6 best teams in the country. Tim, did you have any other observations you wanted to share about the game before I go?
No, that was it. Those were my 2 big takeaways. It was a great game all around, and Matt pointed out the in-game stuff that was great.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think taking a step back, the bigger picture of sort of how this team has played against these types of teams this year and how well Justin Fields has done continues to do are my big takeaways.
Yeah. I mean, last year, and we talked about this, I think, on last Sunday's pod. You had teams like Minnesota, Indiana, Nebraska come into the shoe last year and play Ohio State well into the fourth quarter. There was the debacle at Purdue where we never showed up for that game. We never answered the bell. And then the Maryland game, which was an abomination. I mean, we should have lost that game. And those are programs that are several notches below Ohio State. Those should never be games. So to your point, those opponents on this year's schedule have been, put out of their misery mid-second quarter, and by halftime the game's over. I saw an interesting comment by Jonah Booker, who's one of the Bucknuts guys, on Twitter on Friday night. He called Chris Olave Terry Glenn Light, which I thought was interesting. He does. I don't think he has. I'm not sure that he has Terry Glenn's like top end speed, but he does have. He runs clean, efficient routes. He's smooth. He's got great hands. I thought that was an interesting comparison, and Olave looked really good. In 3 quarters of action against Northwestern, he had a couple of nice touchdown catches, especially the one in the corner of the end zone, and what was a gorgeous throw from Fields. Getting both feet down. I mean, that's a touchdown in the NFL. Some fans were concerned about the success Northwestern had running the ball early in the game, and I thought Ohio State made some good adjustments there. Namely, to me, it looked like Northwestern's success running the ball ended when they moved Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett into the middle of that defensive line. Those are their space eaters. I think when they want to go run stuffer mode, they bring in Togiai and Haskell Garrett. And that speaks to the versatility, the depth of what they can do in a bunch of different areas, but especially on the defensive line. When Togiai and Haskell Garrett came in there, I think they put an end to that Northwestern running game. Northwestern finished with 157 yards rushing. I think that might be the highest output that any opponent has had this year, total output, but they only averaged 3.3 yards a carry. So I don't know. Ohio State fans probably don't need to be that concerned. And I think that's there was one other remark I'll make, and it's another Doug Lesmerises observation, which I thought was really interesting in their post-game pod. He called Ohio State boring awesome, which is just, what else can you say about them, right? I mean, I think the three of us doing this podcast today, it's like we could talk about, all the things we saw on Friday night, but it would really just be kind of regurgitating what we've seen through the previous 6 games, right? I mean, they haven't left us much to talk about.
That's like I'd call that quote stupid, smart, whatever. I mean, it's like, there's nothing boring about this team on either side of the ball. I mean,
that's true.
It's just, I don't think, they're predictable in that they aren't making a lot of mistakes.
Right.
I don't know why you would want that on your team, to see that as I don't know what type of entertainment he likes on the side, but it's like, this is the type of football, honest honestly that I've been waiting for this team to play, and it's finally here.
Yeah, you're right. Well, he's not a fan, right? He's an objective journalist. I think he just wants something juicy to report on. So I kind of see where he's coming from. But I'm with you. I mean, this team is anything but boring. I mean, there are explosive plays all over the place. You've skill and a depth of talent that's a lot of fun to watch. NFL talent all over the place. I mean, they're a fun team to watch for sure. What else? There was one other thing I was going to say about the Northwestern performance, and that was J.K. Dobbins, and then watching Jonathan Taylor, on Saturday. You just know it's coming because these postseason awards are political, and voters don't want to give all the love to just one team. But Jonathan Taylor is going to end up ahead of J.K. Dobbins in whatever Player of the Year rankings or first team votes. But I mean, Dobbins, I think, has clearly separated himself from Taylor as a running back. I think he has shown to be the much better back, in my opinion. I mean, you saw it on Friday night, right? He caught he had a 68-yard touchdown run, and then followed that up, or it wasn't a touchdown, it was a long run, and then followed it up with a touchdown run after that, and then he caught that slant over the middle for a touchdown. He's breaking off big runs almost every single week. And as I had said previously about Taylor, I mean, 15, 20-yard runs from scrimmage are all he's really putting out. And, he's getting a much higher volume of carries than Dobbins. But what's going to happen, right? At the end of the year, the voters are going to vote Jonathan Taylor like Offensive Player of the Year or something. It drives me nuts, those awards. Do we have any other comments on Ohio State Northwestern? Anything else you guys want to share?
No, I mean, what you said about Dobbins, I mean, he just put in such a great effort. I mean, they were doing a good job containing him for like 2 to 3 yards in the first quarter. And then, it seemed like he took the fight to them a little bit more and started muscling his way through there and using his speed and cutting with a little bit more authority.
Yeah,
Look, he won't win an award, and probably Dave won't win Coach of the Year if we go undefeated. It's fine as long as we're lifting the main trophy at the end of the year. I'll take that over all this other shit.
Me too. Yeah. There was a couple interesting tidbits, I guess, that since last night. Ohio State jumped Clemson in the AP poll, so they're now number 3, for whatever that's worth. And then I don't know if you caught any of that Alabama game yesterday, guys, but Tua Tagovailoa went down. Another high ankle sprain for him, only it's the other leg. It's his right leg, and it sounds like he's going to miss like another 3 or 4 weeks. He might even miss that LSU game. I guess the only reason I bring that up is it just feels like, you look at the way Clemson's been playing, they look very much like the 2015 Ohio State team, right? They've kind of mailed it in every single week. The door is wide open for Ohio State to win a national title this year. I just feel like, obviously they're going to have to sustain it for another, 2.5 months, but the door is wide open for them to get a title this year. I really believe that.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way, Zach. Certainly Clemson's got an easy road. You could argue Ohio State's got a fairly easy road. Yeah, they have to play Wisconsin and Penn State, and of course everyone has a rivalry game, so it's there. But I think the way Ohio State's playing, to your point, I think it's completely doable and completely within their control. I think Ohio State plays Ohio State's ball. They win.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, can somebody get them out of playing their game?
Mm-hmm.
And to date, that hasn't really happened. And it's hard to really say. I was thinking about it last night, and I'll give props to Paige. We did our mid-season predictions of what you thought the hardest game was going to be, and he's the only one that said Michigan. And I'm kind of coming around to that. After what I saw last night, you could see Michigan maybe getting a little bit better if they found something in the second half. And Ohio State has everything on the line, having to go to Ann Arbor.
Yeah,
that'll be tough. That'll be a tough game, even if Michigan isn't the typical Michigan team. I think their pressure will be so great at that point if Ohio State is undefeated, and let's say Michigan is 7-4. It sets up for a tough game, and that could be the one thing that takes them out of being Ohio State. is the stage being so big.
All right, define tough game.
Yeah, look, I hear you. I don't think Michigan is very good, but as we've seen, like that game, it's just always, more pressure, more stress, sort of more everything. Fields hasn't been to Ann Arbor before. Maybe that's good. Maybe the fact that he didn't grow up in Ohio and hasn't thought about that rivalry his whole life, maybe that's a good thing. He just goes up there and treats it like another game.
Always? Well, was it always a tough game? Was it last year? Was that a tough game?
I mean, the 2016 game was pretty harrowing. Yeah. I mean, there have been some. The 2013 game, that was way too close for comfort. I think Michigan's going to have to do something about, and once you see these trends develop, they're really hard to reverse, especially this late in the season. But the slow starts in big games, the mental mistakes, the turnovers, the lack of execution. I mean, if Penn State and Wisconsin are feasting on that with Michigan, imagine what this Ohio State team is going to do, because they leave you no margin for error whatsoever. And I guess I'd have to see how the rest of the season goes with Michigan. I actually had agreed with Paige, Tim, that I thought Michigan was their toughest remaining game on the schedule, primarily because it fell right after Penn State. But watching yesterday, watch them do it again in a big game. Now, granted, they'll be at home, but just, you give up a 3-touchdown, 4-touchdown lead, and you're down, 3 or 4 touchdowns to start a game. That's a trend they're going to have to reverse between now and when they play Ohio State. I don't think it's all of a sudden going to happen, on November 30th, in the big house against Ohio State. I think they have to figure that shit out between now and then, maybe as soon as Notre Dame next week.
Right. It's the one thing that they could happen, and it's something that I thought about last night. If Ohio State starts slow, or first quarter they look sluggish, and they're like, well, that's okay. Your second quarter is when we turn it on, and they don't turn it on, and then we go into halftime. It's 14-7. Mm-hmm. How will they adjust to that? Because they've come to where, okay, second quarter is when we show what we got.
Yeah.
And if they can't do that, like depending on that second quarter to really get them to increase the spread, and it doesn't happen, and they go in the halftime going like, oh shit, man, we can't. We tried to turn it on and we didn't get anywhere. Yeah. And then they start getting inside their own heads, like, okay, and it starts becoming less about Ohio State versus Michigan than Ohio State versus Ohio State. And that's when I think that's the only way I can see them kind of losing that game, is if they start doubting, or they start getting desperate, or they start panicking because they're not doing the things that they usually do, or they do and it's not working.
I mean, it seems like almost every national championship run has at least one game like that. No matter how good the team is, you're going to have a moment where you just didn't bring your A game and the opposition did, and you're fighting for your life in the fourth quarter. It just feels like, it happens. I mean, it happens with every team on a title run. Either they lose that game and can fight their way back into the title discussion, or they eke it out. So I'd just be surprised if that moment doesn't come by the end of the season, even knowing how much better Ohio State has looked compared to everybody left on their schedule. But I guess we'll see. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how they respond in that moment. If it doesn't come in the regular season, you would think it most assuredly would come in the postseason somewhere. Yeah. Well, guys, what else? Is there anything else we want to cover before we're coming up on about 55 minutes? Not a bad effort for a Sunday. We were a little short-staffed today. Anything else you guys want to mention before we shut it down?
Yeah. Would you think missing a podcast, going to see a big mound of sand is a worthwhile, showing your dedication to the podcast? I mean, a mound of sand over talking with your buddies about the great Ohio State football team.
Well, here's a better question. I think this is a better question, Matt. What's a better excuse for missing a podcast? Is it being too hungover, or being hanging out in the sand dunes? Because there's somebody on this podcast who's used both excuses. I can't remember what's his name. I can't remember that guy's name anyway. but
Yeah,
Kirk.
yeah, we're gonna start calling him Van Rutgers because he's not showing up.
Oh, our friend Paige. Well, hopefully he'll show up this Thursday to defend his reputation. All right, hey guys, listen, it's been a great effort. Thanks so much for making the time on a Sunday. We will reconvene later this week. I think it's probably going to be on Thursday. We'll work it out, and we'll come up with Wisconsin predictions.
All right, go Bucks.
All right, fellas, go Bucks.
Thanks,
Have a good night.